Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. Yesterday, in a powerful and emotional address in front of the Prime Minister and State Chief Ministers, the Chief Justice of India drew attention to the huge backlog of cases that have clogged our courts, the slow process of nominating judges, and the fact that we have far fewer judges than the country actually needs. It's an old and well-known problem, but the Chief Justice has drawn attention to it in a dramatic way. So tonight we examine the different aspects of the situation as well as the solutions that are presently under consideration. My guests are former Solicitor General and Attorney General Soli Sorabji, the President of the Supreme Court Bar Association Dushyant Dave, BJD Lok Sabha MP Kalikesh Singh Deo, Congress Rajya Sabha MP and also leading Supreme Court lawyer Abhishek Singhvi, and BJP spokesperson Shaina NC. Soli Sorabji, let me start with a general question. Would you accept the problem the Chief Justice highlighted yesterday, both about the ridiculously small number of judges in India, and secondly, the slow process of appointing new judges is not just a critical issue, but one which, if it's not tackled, will add hugely to the already enormous backlog of cases? In other words, this is both a deeply worrying problem, but it's also a problem that hasn't got the attention it deserves from successive governments over perhaps 30 years.
Yes, Karan, you're right. It's a very alarming situation. And the Chief Justice pointed out, maybe dramatically, but what he pointed out was actually alarming in the sense that the number of judges with reference to population in India is abysmally low. That apart, in fact, when you want to appoint judges, and you know, under the present system, the collegium sends a name, thereafter government, if it's not any information which is a bearing on the character or competence of a judge, they send it back to the collegium. Collegium reiterates it, and then the government has to accept it. But then do it within a month. And after, go ahead with the appointments. Why should the appointments be delayed? There's no reason at all.
Absolutely. Dushyant Dave, the Chief Justice said, and I'm quoting him, "It's not enough to criticize. You cannot shift the entire burden onto the judiciary." He pointed out that as far back as 1987, the Law Commission had recommended that there should be 50 judges per million people. But even 30 years later, the ratio is just 15 judges per million, although in that interim period, the population has increased by 250 million. Doesn't this clearly suggest that successive governments for 30 years have failed to act and possibly failed irresponsibly?
Well, absolutely correct. And let me correct you, Karan, that the recommendation in 1987 by the Law Commission headed by Justice D.A. Desai, one of our outstanding retired Supreme Court judges, was not just 50 judges per million. It was actually 107 judges per million. And that was over a period of 10 years that they wanted. And for immediate relief, the Law Commission had said 50 judges at least for a million of population should be, done. Now that was way back in 87, it was not done. You have to understand that that report of the Law Commission repeatedly says that the reason why this strength of the judges is not being increased across the country is because the political class does not want to really empower the judiciary. And he has of course lamented that everybody, including the civil society, the bar particularly, and many others are responsible for this situation, because nobody has really voiced concerns about it, although as we all know that in India it's now firmly established that justice delayed is justice denied. Sure. And there is nothing which we have done over last 40 to 50 years.
I want to take up, Abhishek Singhvi, a point the Chief Justice made very eloquently yesterday, but it's also been echoed by both Soli Sorabji and Dushyant Dave a moment ago. The Chief Justice clearly suggested that governments were unnecessarily slow, and sometimes they even deliberately dragged their feet appointing judges. He said 170 recommendations were pending with the Law Ministry for over 2 months, but nothing had happened. I'm going to quote him. "Why should the Intelligence Bureau take months to send its report? Why can't the Prime Minister's office asked the IB to send its report within 15 days. Now, Chief Justice Thakur may have been referring in this specific instance to a problem that exists today, but you know and I know that something similar has happened for 20 years with all governments. Why are governments deliberately slow?
Well, I don't think there can be two views on that. It doesn't matter the color of the government, but on this matter there has been a certain laggard pace. In fact, there is a very quaint and interesting story of a IB person saying that this man should not be appointed because he's an alcoholic. It's well known in the bar that that man was a teetotaler. His nickname was Boozer. That's the level of an IB. I also think that there should be a protocol which follows with the special sub officer of the ministry who follows at each high court at each level the date from 6 months before retirement of the incumbent and starts planning a bar chart for appointment in the future and then jogging every relevant authority in that regard to monitor it. Now, these simple things have not happened. I don't think it can be ascribed to an individual deliberate malafide intent not to appoint. But certainly it can be ascribed to taking it very casually, treating it as a government department, treating it as just like another executive action, and also not creating the modern managerial computer systems which are required. For example, Karan, there's a whole flow chart which everybody knows it must follow before you become a High Court judge, or a flow chart before I become a Supreme Court judge. At each level of the flow chart there is a delay. You need people, a special officer at each level, only to do the pushing and the reminding and the embarrassment. Now, for example, and I must add one more thing, Karan, sometimes it's a self-inflicted wound. In the current context, I mean, I'm 100% supporting the Chief Justice, but in the current context, there was no reason for the self-inflicted wound of having a year and a half pass by with over hundreds of vacancies, 450 vacancies at the High Court level out of a total strength of 1100, while we debated the NJAC. Irrespective of the judicial debate in the NJAC, in the court, there was no reason to have a freeze on appointments.
Absolutely.
There was no reason to delay appointments after that on all this technicality of a memorandum of procedure. These are all matters which are fairly obvious. They don't require rocket science. But I think, unfortunately, the whole system doesn't come together.
Kalikesh Singhvi, I want to take up what Abhishek Singhvi very artfully called a self-inflicted wound. On the one hand, you have a total pendency of nearly 3 crores. On the other hand, compared to the 40,000 judges the Law Commission said we needed in 1987, and I bear in mind the Shantavis actually said the figure was almost double that, we have actually at the moment something under 20,000. Furthermore, there are 470 vacancies in the High Court, 4,580 in the subordinate courts, 6 at the Supreme Court out of 31. How much of the blame actually lies with the Supreme Court and the collegium system the Supreme Court has adopted for allowing such huge vacancies to come into being? To what extent, therefore, do you agree with Abhishek Singhvi's description? This is, to some extent, a self-inflicted wound.
Karan, not being a lawyer, I can afford to be a little more blunt. While there is no doubt that the government has to act much faster and much better in ensuring that there is a strengthened judicial system by sanctioning more posts if required, the fact is that almost 1/3 of the sanctioned posts are lying vacant, and for no reason at all. There is an absolute necessity at the moment to try and fill up those posts. Now, what I have been given to understand is that there is an element of hierarchical system where judges plan successions, where they plan entries into the subordinate courts, into the high courts, and therefore into Supreme Courts. And this has been done for many years now, 30 or 40 years, it's been happening. So I think that, it's not, to just lay blame at the political doorstep is not the answer. We have to fix the entire system, and also by looking within the judiciary itself to make sure the judiciary acts in a more prudent manner to ensure that these vacancies are filled up.
Very quickly, Dushyantave, is there a certain element of internal judicial politics that sometimes slows up the appointment of judges, either because they can't agree or because of rivalries or other internal problems within the brotherhood of judges? There was a hint of that in what Kalikesh Singhvi was saying. I'm teasing it out and making it a blunt question.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. I think we are concentrating on the appointments to the higher judiciary, the high courts and the Supreme Court. But real challenge is the number of judges available in the subordinate judiciary across the country. And that strength is really required to be increased manifold times. These 3 crore cases that you are talking about are essentially pending in those subordinate courts, civil and criminal both. So first and foremost, the power of appointment really rests with the government in respect of subordinate courts. It's not the judiciary. They do have to consult the judiciary, but the Public Service Commission under the respective state governments makes the appointment. So they have to really take the responsibility. But before that, they must really sit down to find out how many judges are required today. They must sanction those posts. They must sanction the money available for that. They must sanction the infrastructure available for that. So unless and until governments do this, it is very difficult, and those in political class must realize that breakdown of law is certainly going to lead to a very serious chaotic situation in a democracy, perhaps leading to anarchy.
Okay.
But yes, I agree partly with Mr. Dev that judges are equally responsible for delaying the appointments, and there is some amount of truth that this is partly because judges many a times wish to bring their own people into the system. So I don't put it beyond judges this, and I think we must take the responsibility. The bar, as I must say that as president of the bar, I must also take the responsibility, and I am sure Mr. Swarabji should own it up as well, that none of us have really put pressure on the judges in last 20-30 years to ensure that the judges really make independent appointments. They do it as quickly as possible, and bar really puts the pressure on them. It's not happened. I accept that.
Very quickly, China NC, to what extent do you believe that in fact this is an example of how the Indian system, and I'm not pointing at executive versus judiciary, but it's an example of how the Indian system actually fails to function effectively? Because we all know this problem is there. For 30 years it's been developing. We've had advice from law commissions about how to tackle it, but it hasn't happened. It shows us up collectively in a very poor light.
Yes. Absolutely, Karanji. And if I could just add one point, you take an average judge in India who handles close to 2,600 cases a year, vis-a-vis the US, where a judge would probably handle just 81 cases a year. Now you go back into time, 1987 is 30 years ago, where you have the Law Commission talking about raising the judges from 21,000 to 40,000. And the population since 1987 goes up 25 crores. So we need so many more judges. But having said that, I think the spirit in which the Prime Minister yesterday accepted these suggestions, and he went on to say that yes, there is need for the government and the judiciary to talk, to collaborate, and to come up with conclusive solutions, and do the same Prime Minister who was the then Chief Minister of Gujarat, that had a working model where he wanted to do away with pending cases. There were holiday courts, judges were working overtime. All these suggestions were also implemented as part of the entire process of clearing the backlog that the judiciary faces today. And I only want to quote what the Prime Minister said yesterday, where he said, if a closed door and closed team norms allow, I will definitely try to find a way out. So he is not saying that yes, we will do it immediately without following due process of law, but saying that yes, we must come up with a conclusive solution, because we need to have judges of caliber too. Just by appointing judges, are those judges equipped to take on these particular cases, or do we need retired judges to also advise us and be a part of the improvisation?
Let's take the solutions one by one, because that's what I want to come to. Sorry, Sarabji, I'm going to come to the solutions that are being talked about. First, the solution that the Chief Justice himself talked about yesterday. Beyond asking the government to create more judicial posts, which is critical, beyond asking the government to hurry up the appointment of judges, which is very important, he's also decided, collectively with his brother judges, to invoke Article 224A, allowing retired judges to be reappointed on an ad hoc basis for 3 years or till they attain the age of 65. At the same time, he's talked about holiday courts working on Saturdays and Sundays, and he's talked also about the possibility of early morning and late evening courts. The question I want to put is this. In your eyes, as a former Solicitor General and Attorney General, does all of this add up as a significant step to alleviate the problem? or is it still a drop in the ocean?
No, current. In fact, Dushan may not know, but advocated appointment of ad hoc judges way back in 1973 and repeatedly again, because I think we should make use of the constitutional provisions. Why not appoint ad hoc judges? And apart from number of judges, I think it's very important we also not emphasize the number but the quality. Because what happens, the revision petition should not take more than 1 hour for disposal at the hands of an experienced, competent judge. Takes 1 day, 2 days when a not so competent judge is there. So not only quantity, even the quality. Talking of quality, you must provide the proper infrastructure when you talk of subordinate judiciary. They deal with so many matters, they take out evidence themselves, they don't know assistance of stenographers, typists. So the whole thing has to be looked as a crusade in which everyone has to play a part. Now I'm sorry to say, some of the members of my profession are responsible for arrears and for delays. Once having obtained a favorable stay order, every tick in the book is used to adjourn the matter. He gets dysentery, the client gets diarrhea, and it goes on. And unfortunately, the judges should realize that they are not in a popularity contest. No adjournments except for really compelling reasons.
Okay.
And that's very important. That's why the bar is very remiss, I think, in allowing matters to be adjourned. And naturally, judges don't want to displease members of the bar.
Absolutely.
But as I said, they are not running a popularity contest. They must be strict about it.
You're very correct in saying that lawyers have a responsibility for delaying justice when they keep asking for adjournments, when particularly there's no need to do so. But I want to come back, Abhishek Singhvi, to some of the problems connected with the solution that the Chief Justice himself has proposed. Whether we're talking about reappointing retired judges under Article 224A, or whether you're talking about holiday courts or early morning and late night courts, all of this costs money. Now, the Chief Justice has suggested that when it's a question of money, the whole issue gets caught up in what he called a tug-of-war between the centre and the state governments. I'm going to quote him. He says, the central government says we cannot do anything, and it's state government's responsibility to initiate proposals for increasing the number of judges or improving infrastructure. But the state governments say we can't do anything because the central government must first provide the funds. And then the Chief Justice added, while this tug-of-war goes on, the judge's strength remains exactly where it is. Now, he's made some great proposals yesterday, but will the money problem result in another tug-of-war between state and central governments and stymie his ideas?
Karan, first of all, what he has said is largely true, but money is not and need not be a problem. Ultimately, the portion of the budget allocated to judiciary as a whole, including judicial infrastructure, is infinitesimal and fractional compared to the wasteful expenditure around the country. Point one. Point two, when the judiciary puts its mind to it, and with a series of PILs and mandamuses, money is plenty and it will flow. Yes, there is more a jurisdictional turf war, not really the quantum of money. For example, the Gram Nyayalayas which we got are caught up in a turf war at that time and even now about how much contribution of the centre and how much contribution of the state. Now this can be ultimately sorted out by a simple protocol which can be even judicially laid down. Ultimately, I mean, even though they are deciding their own institution, a judgment would have to come saying that the protocol has to be as simple as this. There is not really therefore a problem of budgetary funds or quantum. The problem is egos, ministerial egos, central government versus state government, turf wars. I think that if people like the Prime Minister and the Chief Justice put their head together, along with a few nudges and pushes, will not be a problem.
Very quickly, Soli Sorabji, you've been Attorney General and Solicitor General. Do you believe that there is a large number of retired judges willing to be reappointed in sufficient numbers to make a difference? And secondly, will those reappointed retired judges be willing to work Saturdays and Sundays? Will they be willing to work early morning and late evenings? Because it's one thing to suggest this is a solution, But it may be quite a different thing to find retired people willing to fulfill those functions, because it puts an onerous burden on them at an age when perhaps they want to slow down.
Current first point, I'm sure large number of retired judges will be willing to act and sit in the Supreme Court. Whether it's from in the early morning or late evening, that's another matter. As a matter of convenience, that can be sorted out. But the thing is, those judges must also be approached in a proper manner. I'm sure they will not decline. I'm sure many of them will look that as their duty to address a serious problem of arrears. And I think that should be tried. I don't know of any retired judge or ad hoc judge who has point blank refused.
Okay.
Holiday courts and other courts are a different matter. Basically, their services will be available and can be utilized to reduce the areas of cases to some extent possible.
Kalikesh Singh Deo, the
I'm
Prime Minister...
confident they won't refuse.
Kalikesh Singh Deo, the Prime Minister suggested, if propriety and constitutional convention permits, a closed-door meeting between top ministers and top judges to sort out the problem. Given that this is a problem that involves a tradition of 30 years of not being handled, given that it's a problem that involves clashes of egos, is this the right approach? A closed-door meeting between people who hopefully will be on the same side wanting to sort out the problem?
Well, Karan, we've just had a situation where the government and the judiciary have fought bitterly over the NJAC. And, in this kind of an environment, I suspect that finding a solution will not be easy. Even the solution that's suggested by the Chief Justice and which was spoken by your panel members as recently is, to appoint retired judges. I think, there is a problem in appointing people to not only the judiciary, any other component of the executive or legislative also, where they don't have a stake in the system. I think a better approach would be to just raise the retirement age. So there's a process of promotion, the process of accountability which remains. I think a lot more debate needs to happen about this than just off-the-cuff remarks between the top judiciary and the government. And you really should bring professionals and experts as the ones who are on your panel to help with that.
The thing is, increasing the retirement age will reduce the number of vacancies possibly, because they'll occur at a later stage, but it won't increase the number of judges. And what's urgently needed is not just to reduce vacancies, but increase judges. That is what bringing back retired judges will do. Very quickly, do you think it's still not such a great idea?
Karan, there is a need to reduce the number of vacancies as well as increase the number of judges. I am just saying those who are in the system need to be accountable to the system and have hope of promotions.
Okay.
And that's why I don't want them to be coming in as retired judges, but rather than be a part of the system to begin with. So they're just held more accountable and have a hope of getting a higher promotion if they're in the High Court or Supreme Court maybe.
Shaina NC, you referred in complimentary terms to the Prime Minister practicing something that he had done in Gujarat, which is to tell judges not to take vacations. He raised that idea yesterday himself, but unfortunately, he got a fairly tough response from the Chief Justice. The Chief Justice didn't approve of the idea. He said, and I'm quoting him, "What do you think we do during our holidays? Do you think we go to Manali? Do you think we go for trekking?" And the Chief Justice went on to point out that judges often use their vacations to write judgments. He quoted the example of Justice Kehar as an example of a man who not only had to use his vacation, but had to take leave on top of that to write his judgments. And the question I want to put to you is this: was the Prime Minister wise to raise that issue of judges not taking holidays or reducing their holidays? It seemed to touch a sore point just when that was the wrong thing to do.
Currently, you forgot to mention one line that he mentioned while saying this. He said, when one side is ready, the other side is not. Ask the bar if they are ready. So I think this is also not a commentary on our Prime Minister, but a commentary on the system, that you have lawyers who sometimes say that they will not want to have these holiday courts, etc. But having said that, I think what your panelists have said is the mature way ahead, which is that yes, we do need to have more judges. We need to have the expertise that comes along with it. Retired judges, I'm sure that if we do take them absolutely into confidence and explain the kind of backlog we have, which our Honorable Prime Minister will do in the days to come, we will be having some kind of a solution forward. And having said that, I think you also need to give it to our Prime Minister that he had the courage of conviction to agree that there are systemic failures and we can collectively work towards coming up with a via media, which means the judiciary and the government, without one blaming the other or not taking the onus of the other.
But you know, you very correctly made a point there that I want to put quickly to Dushyant before I take a break. The Chief Justice did say, Dushyant, that when he asked whether the Supreme Court Bar Association, and you're the president of it at the moment, would be willing to work during vacations, he didn't get a response. His exact words were that he asked the Bar Association to give him the names of lawyers who would work during their vacations, and no such list, he said, had been given to him.
Ask the bar if they are ready.
Well, I think I may disagree with the Honorable Chief Justice there. He did make a request to me in the open court last week. I immediately have issued an appeal to all members of the bar through emails and WhatsApp messages, and I have told them to revert back to me with specific cases that any member or every member would want to be heard during the vacation. And I did inform the Honorable Chief Justice, in fact, on Friday itself in the function reception for Chief Justices of India, where I told him that I have done such exercise and that I am awaiting the response of the members. So I think I perhaps would not be in position to agree with that statement of the Honorable Chief Justice. But yes, it does take time but let me say one more thing. That I don't think the solution of engaging the retired judges is any solution at all. It is not even a trickle. So I don't think we should really go about it. Increasing the age, perhaps it may or it may not be, because what we really need today in the judicial system is from within the system tremendous efficiency and tremendous case management, which I think judiciary needs to learn lessons from management experts. Judiciary is not willing to do that. Biggest problem is judiciary is not willing to engage with the bar. Unless and until judiciary engages with the bar on a very, very systematic basis. I have been appealing to the judges, Chief Justices repeatedly. I don't think they are really interested in giving up their power. They think that they have some kind of a divine power which should not be shared with anybody. So unless and we have tremendous scope to improve the system from within the system. And we can do it if we sit together. Everybody knows that. But unfortunately, that's not happening. So I think, and I don't think that we have to wait for the government to really help us out. We can do it.
I'm going to take a break at that point. When I come back, I'm going to discuss a radical solution that some people are hoping might help. Not that it will be the perfect solution, and that is the creation of 4 national courts of appeal in all the 4 corners of the country, reducing the Supreme Court to just a constitutional court. Would that be a solution? Would it be a part solution? Or is it irrelevant to the problem we face? Incidentally, one of the hearings on that matter happened to be today. That's the subject we're going to take up after the break. See you in a moment's time. To the point when we are discussing a speech made by the Chief Justice of India yesterday, where he raised the question, how does the backlog of cases in courts get handled by the government? So, Sarabji, I want to take up an idea that is being considered by the Supreme Court, and coincidentally, one of the hearings on this issue happened to be today. Would creating 4 national courts of appeal in the 4 corners of the country and limiting the Supreme Court to only constitutional issues be a way of effectively tackling the backlog of over 60,000 cases that are stuck in the Supreme Court? Or would it only make a difference at the level of those Supreme Court cases and not matter to high courts and anything below?
Yeah, correct, Karan. I'm not in favor of the proposal, creating more courts. The real reason is the present Supreme Court was realized. And I'm not against judicial activism, but it shouldn't degenerate to judicial inventionism. Every issue of public interest does not raise a matter of constitutional importance, which requires adjudication by the Supreme Court. That realization must be there. And I think it would be good if the judges really, if I may say so, control their tendency to interfere in matters which are beyond the judicial ken. And that's why it results in all these problems. People rush to Supreme Court in other matters. So I don't think we need other four courts. That will have its own problems. Let the judges of the Supreme Court realize what is the jurisdiction in adjudicating the under Article 32, 136, matters of constitution and importance, matters which affect the life of the nation, issues which need to resolve conflicts on judges, not every popular interest or popular matter of public interest.
Abhishek Singhvi, what you've heard from Soli Sorabji, a former Attorney General, is that the backlog of some 60,000 plus cases in the Supreme Court needs to be tackled by the judges themselves, showing restraint, not admitting cases that should not be heard by the Supreme Court, being more careful about what is added to that list. Do you think that is the answer? Do you think this idea of creating 4 national courts of appeal would not be an effective way of bringing appeals closer to people geographically and also ensuring that they're handled possibly 4 times as fast?
No, I would not want a set of national courts of appeal for a variety of reasons. First of all, I think it's a sledgehammer approach to try and deal with a fly. 60,000 arrears leads to a churning process of the whole country for years. You need to amend the Constitution of India. Given the democracy tax and the price we pay for democracy, parliamentary delays, disputes, 2/3 majority, it is going to take eternity before you even amend the Constitution, and there will be endless debates, and all the time you're trying to reduce 60,000 matters. You're talking of 2.5 crore arrears. That energy is much better spent by strengthening the lowest ladder and the high court ladders, not creating a new set of appeal courts. Thirdly, Karan, I think the whole concept of Supreme Court as an integrated court, as a single court, you are only really adding another layer in between, and if you do not exercise restraint in respect to matters where you should not interfere, you will do the same thing even with that layer. Okay. So I don't think this is something on which it could have been possible at the founding stage, but today you'll be disrupting too many things to create a new regime.
Very quickly, Dushyant Dave, and I'm going to ask you to give me an answer literally with yes or no, because I then want to go on to something else with you again. Are you in favor of this proposal that the Supreme Court is considering of creating 4 national courts of appeal, or does your heart lie with Soli Sorabji and Abhishek Singhvi, who are very firmly against it? Yes or no, and I'll go to other things with you.
I am absolutely against it.
All right. Then I won't ask you why, because we've got 3 people against it, and I imagine your reasons are very similar to theirs. I'm going to put something else to you. It seems that as far as the judges themselves are concerned, the cure to the problem is increasing the number of judges, not by bringing in retired people to act as ad hoc judges, not by working over Saturdays and Sundays and early in the morning or late at night, but by simply, and very importantly, increasing the quantum of judges provided for by the system. Do you see that happening easily? Because it hasn't happened for 30 years, and as you say, and you pointed this out very wisely, the Law Commission didn't recommend 50. Its original recommendation was 107 per 1 million. And we're nowhere near that. So do you see that happening? And if it's not going to happen easily, are we going to be stuck with this problem forever?
Well, let me answer that by reading the Law Commission's interim report, last paragraph, which was made on 31st of July 1987. And I quote, "It is very much hoped by the Commission that this first interim report will invoke sufficient parliamentary, public and specialist discussion in order to assist a viable and comprehensive manpower planning for the Indian judiciary." Nothing of this kind has happened. Neither the political class parliamentary debates have taken place. Public, including the media, have never bothered about it. Specialists, including lawyers, have never discussed about it. So this has been a dead letter for over 36 years now. So I don't think the increase in number of judges is going to happen in foreseeable future. You have to tighten the system. You have to make the judges much more efficient. You have to ensure that the judiciary functions in a much more efficient manner, for which the responsibility entirely lies with the Chief Justice of every High Court and the Chief Justice of India. And of course, the bar has to support them substantially. Let me also say one more thing. why I don't agree with Mr. Sorabji and all about the interim court before the Supreme Court is that today, because of the bad delivery of judgments by the high courts and the subordinate courts, the Supreme Court is required to interfere time and again. It's not supposed to do so, but it does because it finds that the judges are giving terribly wrong judgments.
Okay.
Why are they giving wrong judgments? Because we have ended up appointing really terrible judges for a long period of time.
Quite
and
right.
Nobody has questioned that.
And
lastly, I must say one
very
more
quickly
thing, that I disagree with Ms. Saina, that in Gujarat, the fast track courts had to be shut down. Gujarat has had no good record on judicial reforms or better working of the judicial system. I come from Gujarat. I have been following Gujarat very closely.
Okay.
I go there at least 4 times a month.
You have to make
I
it
know
short.
what's happening there. Gujarat is no example.
Very quickly, Kalikesh Singh Deo.
Mr. Dave, you've been
I'm sorry,
criticizing
Saina,
Mr.
I am
Modi
not letting
also,
this
so
become
I
a
don't
tu-tu
want to
meme
go by
between
your
the two of you.
judgment.
I have other issues that I want to take up. Accept his judgment on Gujarat. If you don't like it, I'll register your disapproval, but I'm not going into that issue. Kalikesh Singh Deo, one of the things that you heard from Dushyant Dave is that the onus is on politicians as a whole to act. At the end of the day, whether it's appointment of more judges, whether it's changing the ratio of judges or whatever, the onus is on politicians. And if Parliament doesn't awaken to the crisis, and if MPs don't feel a need to give this priority, it will never happen. Do you think there will be, after the Chief Justice broke down yesterday, greater importance given by MPs across parties to this issue?
I think so, Karan. Even if it's not been discussed in Parliament as yet, it's already being discussed in Central Hall, and that's a prelude to what's going to come up in Parliament. But look at it from a government's perspective. If I have to, let's say in Odisha, if I have to take money away from a drought-ridden Odisha where people are dying and put it into judiciary, then I have to know, as Mr. Dave said, that the judiciary works efficiently. That is going to lend to a lot of justice being given out and not necessarily further, further impediments being created in the judicial system or justice delivery system. So I think it's, while Parliament needs to give more funds or gives more attention to this issue, the judicial system also has to be reformed and the system has to become more efficient.
Shaina, let me put it like this. Much depends upon how much importance and priority the Prime Minister gives this issue. And I think the Chief Justice tried to make a personal appeal when he said citizens who would suffer, but Make in India and FDI would suffer because the investors have as much of an interest in speedy and good justice as anyone else. Is this going to rise to somewhere near the top of the Prime Minister's list of priorities?
I'm sure this issue will raise absolute chord with the Honorable Prime Minister, because he has said immediately after, where he wasn't meant to comment, despite that he said yes, he concedes that the government and the judiciary need to talk and need to coordinate and need to come up with a conclusive solution. I don't think this is about a Make in India or just an issue of having foreign investors who need better judiciary. It is about the common Indian man, and when we talk about it, yes, the backlog, when you talk about having more judges, but as I said, at the cost of repetition, if it is not qualitative, it cannot just be quantity, especially in the field of judiciary. And I think when the Chief Justice also made this comment today, he made this comment with sincerity, where he said it's not just about us, it's about the bar as well, when we want to come up with solutions and when we want to come up with less backlog. So I think as a whole, it has to be viewed in totality. Government with judiciary being one aspect, judiciary with the bar being another, and all in all, whether it is working that little extra, which needs to be at least a preliminary step towards reducing the backlog.
Abhishek Singhvi, in our country, everything gets polarized between government and opposition. We are great at going to extremes simply to oppose an idea. But on this issue, can Congress make it non-partisan? Would you support the government in the bigger, wider interest of justice and the ordinary Indian litigant?
I don't think there is a single instance where on matters or bills or resolutions relating to such a subject, the Congress has in any manner been obstructive, negative or otherwise not cooperative. But I think ultimately it's really begging the question, because really this whole process has to start with the initiative, the policy perspective, the plan, the mechanism, everything. The initiative has to come from the government.
Absolutely,
Not only
that
the
I
initiative,
accept.
but the piloting, the pushing. And I can assure you that if that happens, and unfortunately we don't see it anywhere else at the moment, but yes, if it happens, yes, there will be full cooperation.
Very quickly, Soli Sorabji, because we're running out of time, you have perhaps the most experience both of government and the judiciary as a former Solicitor General and Attorney General out of all my panelists. Are you hopeful that we will see meaningful and significant change, or do you think we're going to get a lot of talk, but when the front pages no longer reflect the story, it'll be forgotten? A quick answer, sir, because we're out of time.
No, Karan, I'm hopeful. I'm sure all the stakeholders, the bar, the government, the judges, will make a concerted effort to tackle this problem of arrears, because if it's not tackled, it poses serious danger to our democracy and rule of law.
All right, Dushant,
I'm optimistic.
I saw your finger go up, but then it went down and you sipped something instead.
Just
Is that
one-
perhaps
one
a hint to all of us?
Yeah,
It's time for a drink.
Yeah, I disagree with Dr. Singhvi, because it was the Congress government which, for the Bhopal gas tragedy, had filed an affidavit in the United States court.
Let's not bring in party politics. We've had a good discussion and we've reached a fairly good sound consensus. Let's keep party politics and polemics out of it. My thanks to all my guests.
Karan,
And I think we should all take a lesson from Dushyant. He sipped something, and it's time for all of us to be sipping something as well. Goodbye.
Little Master Sachin Tendulkar has turned 43 today, and he celebrated his day by playing cricket with school children at the MIG Cricket Club. The children who are fighting cancer expressed their wish to play.